be awarded the American Kennel Club's Canine Good Ciitizen or CGC award requires a dog to demonstrate 10 different standards. Our client, a trainer, would like to have an application that presents those 10 different tests as well as an overview and the pledge that the owner takes, before receiving the award. This application gives us some practice in using resources or resource file of RTF strings as well as images. Each button will present a different image and different RTF text. We'll create the GUI, and I would recommend using just simple words for each of the buttons that provide sort of a summary of the standard that's being tested. And we'll use then those names in our RTF string resources so that we have with BTN overview, the string resource is overview. Where BTN petting, the string resource is called petting. BTN sit down stay, the string resource is called sit down stay. And then the images are also corresponding to that. So for the overview, we'd have CGC underscore overview is our image, whereas for distractions, it's CGC underscore distractions. Those are all provided in our course site. So we'll create the interface, we'll code it. I'm going to show you 3 different ways of how to code this particular application, from a simple to a more technically advanced but far less code option. And you'll test and debug, and you'll submit your project with your reflection worksheet. Here's the application running. So we have our image and our RTF text for overview as a default. I can click on accepting a friendly stranger, sitting politely for petting. Notice that each button turns yellow for whatever we're viewing. Appearance and grooming, loose leash walking, walking through a crowd, sit down stay, coming when called, reaction to another dog, reaction to distractions, supervised separation, and the CGC pledge. I'm going to suggest you might want to pause here and try this on your own and come back and I'll give you my code review and show you the 3 different ways that I coded this application as far as the buttons. I played around with the design of my interface for a while and came up with this solution. My form 1 is 700 by 600 pixels in size, 700 wide, 600 high, and I set the text to AKC Canine Good Ciitizen CGC Award information. That's what appears on the title bar. I have a label. Just left it named Label 1, same text though of AKC Canine Good Ciitizen CGC Award. A picture box named Pick Image, and I selected an image that is 400 by 400 pixels in size. I provide all the images in our Canvas course site, but I made the picture box 300 by 300. And so since the image is larger than the picture box control, we also want to make sure we set the size mode to stretch image so we see the entire image. I have a RichTextBox control that I named RTB description. And surprisingly, there is not a RTF property listed here. We can set that though in code. We can set the read only to true. Then I have 12 buttons. And I named these buttons to coincide with the resources that we're going to enter in for our string resources and our image resources to be displayed in these other 2 controls. So the first one is named BTN overview, and you see the text is overview. Then I have BTN stranger, and the text accepting a friendly stranger. BTN petting, sitting politely for petting. BTN grooming, text of appearance and grooming. BTN loose leash, text of loose leash walking. BTN crowd, text of walking through a crowd. This one is text of sit, vertical bar, down, vertical bar, stay. And it's named BTN sit down stay. BTN come, and the text is coming when called. BTN dog, with the text of reaction to another dog. BTN distractions, text of reaction to distractions. BTN separation, text of supervised separation. And then finally a button with the text of the CGC pledge, and I named that one BTN pledge. And I have a label here for the copyright information. That's my interface. Let's look at how we bring our resources in for this project. In our course site, I have provided a zip file of the 12 images we use in this project. Each of the images are 400 by 400 and are either in the public domain or Creative Commons licensed, with the exception of the last image on the pledge, which is copyrighted by me. That is, of course, me and my Rottweiler, Serenity Grace, who was a CGC certified Rottie, as well as a therapy dog and a service dog. I've also included a Word document that has information we'll use for each of the different tests. However, we scroll down through this information. I have formatted the text into RTF to have some text bold in different colors and so forth. And so we're going to use these as our string resources in our project. Each one of these has the name of the resource above it. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy the text itself and just paste it into the string resources. Let's set up our resource file. In the Solution Explorer, I'm going to right-click on the solution and choose Add New Item. And what I want to add is in the general area, a resource file. I'm just going to call it CGC and has a RESX extension. So you'll see that added into your Solution Explorer. And here's where we can add our strings. So my first string is named Overview. I'm going to go back to that Word document, select the Overview RTF text, and paste it into the value. Then I'll do the same thing for the next one, which is Stranger. I'm going to copy that text, set the string name to Stranger, and paste in the value. I'm going to do the same thing for the remaining 10 items, but I'll pause. You don't need to watch copy and paste. I have copied and pasted all of the RTF text for the different items of overview, stranger, petting, grooming, loose leash, crowd, sit down, stay, come, dog, distraction, separation, and pledge. Now, in our resource file, you'll see up here that I'm looking at the strings, but I can also choose to look at images. And here I'm going to choose to add resources, and I'm going to add existing files. I'll go find my files, and I'm just going to simply drag through and select all these. You can do a shift click as well, first and last. I'm going to get these all selected. I'm just going to say open. And has now added those files to my resources with the name of the file. And notice it doesn't show the extension on these names because we don't need to use the extension in calling them. So these are the names of the resources that we will call. Now let's go over to our code. I'm going to double click on my form outside one of the controls to create a form load. And the first item here is going to be RTB description.borderStyle equals borderStyle.none. And I'm putting that in here because I created a border style so I could see the control in my UI, but I really don't want the border there when we run this. So I'm going to set the border style to borderStyle.none. I also want to start with the text being the overview text. So RTB description.rtf equals, I'm going to say my.resources dot, and I can choose CGC, that was the name of the resource file we created, and a dot. And in IntelliSense, I see all of the images as well as the text strings that we added. So I'm going to find this one that says Overview. I can double click on that. So I lost my end sub. I'm going to add that back in. Now let's just test that. I'm going to run my application. And I get the RTF text for the overview coming in with the formatted for colors and italics and bold and so forth. Now we want to code the 12 buttons. So with each button, when I click it, it shows the appropriate photo and the RTF text and highlights the button in yellow. I'm going to show you 3 different ways of doing this. The first one is coding each button individually. Then I'll show you how to code the buttons all together using the same event handler, but we'll use a select case. And then the third option is to use the string of the button name and do some machinations on it, and then simply show the picture and the RTF text. In all cases, we're going to use the resources, both the RTF strings and the images that are in the resources file. So let's take a look at the code for the first one, which is coding each button separately. I created an event handler for each one of the buttons, and in that I'm going to set the pickImage.image to the appropriate resource. In this case is the CGC_overview resource of the image, and then the RTB description RichTextBox RTF property to CGC.overview. So CGC, of course, being the name of our resource file. And then I want to highlight the buttons. So what I did was I set each button back color to white, and then set sender to yellow, sender being the button that I clicked. And I did that so I could copy and paste this to each one of these 12 event handlers without having to make any changes. However, notice that this code is the same in both of these event handlers, and in fact is the same in all 12 event handlers. That's a lot of repetitive code. Now down the road, we're going to soon see that we can create functions that we could call that would do this in a much simpler way. But I want to show you another way that we could do this that would alleviate some of this duplicated code, at least as much of it. And that is to use the mouse up event handler and the click event handler for all the buttons. So we can have a click event for each one of the buttons, but we can have a mouse up event handler that all buttons share. And that mouse up event handler is we could put all of this code in that mouse up. It simply would operate for all 12 buttons. That reduces our code by 1/12 in terms of this particular set of code. But I want to show you even another way it can be done besides that. Here I have the event handlers for each one of the buttons. Is simply setting the image of the picture box and the RTF property of the rich text box. And you can see all the buttons referring to the resources for CGC. I created a variable though up at the top as a class level variable called passButton that is a button. Now I can't set it at this point because when this code runs, the form is not loaded yet. So I can't reference the button. So I need to do that in the form load. So I set passButton equals to btn overview. That was our overview button, which was the one we initially set to yellow in the UI. And we're going to keep track of what the passButton is, because then for my mouse up, I am handling all of the buttons, all 12 of those. And what I'm doing in the code then is setting the passButton.backColor to color.white. So whatever the passButton was that was yellow now becomes white. I'm going to set sender to a back color of yellow, and then I'm going to set passButton to sender. So I'm always changing the last button that was clicked to white and the current button then to yellow. And if I run this, you'll see this works. And so that's one solution. Using this methodology of the mouse up is almost like using a function. It's probably just as little code as we'd write in a function. And so it's a great way of doing this. But you might say, well, I don't want to do all these event handlers. Can we do it just in one and use the select case? And the answer to that is yes. Let me go to that solution. I've selected all 12 of my buttons, and then in the events properties, I'm going to go to the click event, and I've already pre-written the code as option 2. So now all 12 of those buttons will use option 2 for handling the click event. Let's take a look at that code. So private sub option 2, we got sender as object, E as event args, handling all of those button clicks. And then here's my code. I'm going to dim button name as a variable. It's a string variable equals sender.name. I'm going to get the name of the of the button, and I'm going to take .substring element 3, that's going to be the 4th character. That removes the BTN. It's going to go from the 4th character to the end. So BTN overview just becomes overview. Now, I use camel casing, so I'm going to use .toLower method to make that all lowercase. Then I'm going to take that value of button name and use it in any select case. So here I have a case of overview. That's my BTN overview button. We're going to set the image and the RTF text of those two controls. I do the same thing for stranger, petting, grooming, and so forth, all the way down to pledge. And I have a case else that does the same thing as the overview. Probably would never hit the case else, but in some languages we're required to have an else case in this type of structure. We're not required to do that in VB, but it's a good practice to get into. Now I still use the mouse up in this case, but you could, if you didn't want to use the mouse up, is you could code that changing of the back color of the buttons here as well. So we're doing it all with one event handler, but using a select case to handle the different buttons. Is there another way to do this with less code? Especially if rather than 12 buttons, maybe we had 50 or 100 buttons. I don't want to create that many cases. Let's take a look at the third option. Go back to the design, and here rather than option 2, I'm going to code or activate the click event for all the buttons to option 3. Let's take a look at that code. Here is option 3 with sender's object, isEventArgs, handling all those button clicks for the 12 buttons. Again, I'm going to create a button name variable, a string. We're going to take the name of sender, 4th character, so element 3 from substring, .toLower. That strips out the BTN. And then I'm going to dim CGC image as an image variable equals my.resources.cgc. I'm going to call the resource manager and get the object. I'll use an interpolated string here with the $, and then CGC underscore and the name of the button minus that BTN, our button name variable. I'm going to dim CGC RTF. Kind of the same thing, my.resources.cgc.resource manager. In this case, I'm going to do get string and get the button name. We named all of those string resources to coincide with the button name minus the BTN and all lowercase. Then I'm doing a setting pick image.image to CGC image and setting RTF description.rtf to CGC RTF. Much more elegant solution. It wouldn't matter how many buttons I am handling here. I just need to make sure I'm handling all of them. So rather than 12, it could be 50, it could be 100. And none of this code would change as long as my resources are named appropriately and included. Like I said, much more elegant solution. This is not necessarily a beginner's solution, but I wanted to show you the option. At this level, I would probably expect that you would create these all as individual button handlers with click events. Maybe you would do the select case. I wouldn't expect you to be able to do this on your own, but I did. Again, I just wanted to demonstrate the possibilities, because as I always say, there's more than one way to code an application, and code is like a fingerprint because nobody will do it the same way. And even within all of these 3 options, there are multiple variations that we could use. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the Programming Practicum playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos I create, you can click my picture in the top right to subscribe to the channel.